Today on the show, we're doing something a little bit different. We've pulled together highlights from some of our most compelling interviews with the biggest thought leaders in AI, founders, builders, and operators from companies like Marvell, Sierra, Aurora, and more. These conversations reveal how AI is transforming industries like semiconductors, legal, customer experience, and autonomous driving, offering a front row seat to how the future is being built. Let's get into it. First up, we have Bret Taylor of Sierra. He's one of the most impressive people I've ever had the chance to interview. He reflects on AI's potential to reshape entire industries and how this wave could produce the first trillion-dollar SaaS company by moving beyond productivity gains into real labor markets.
There are examples of non-obvious ideas that turned into really big companies. Like you could argue Facebook and was one, and Twitter, now
Airbnb,
X.
Coinbase.
Yeah, and where you're really inventing something new. More often than not, though, the really, really large companies, if you look at like the top, 5 tech companies in the stock market that dominate the S&P 500, it was, making an operating system in the core productivity suite for the early PCs. It was, in Apple's case, making the PC, and then, iPhone was a very novel product. The mobile phone market was established, so it was and then you look at web search, which was I put squarely in the category of obvious idea in the internet. I mean, it really was. It was billions.
There was like 20 companies.
There was like 20 companies doing it, and Amazon. We should buy things online. Like, of course,
Yep.
The idea to start with books was a really savvy
Novel
business
wedge.
move,
Yep.
but it was. So, I think there's a loose, but I think correlation between total addressable market and obviousness, I think is the big thing. And so, there are some really important companies that started with just like, oh, wow, this is a great idea. Like, wow, I wouldn't have thought of that. Most of the largest companies in the world are doing something that is very important and very mainstream and very widely used, like calling customer support. And as a consequence, everyone's staring at that market, as everyone should be. This is what capitalism is. So it will drive down costs and make companies with better products, better execution succeed. And that competition's, as much as I would love to be the only company in this space, it drives. This is why capitalism is amazing, right? Like,
Yeah.
I'm paranoid about all of our competitors. We're like, we respect some products, we respect some go-to-market teams. Everyone's got different strengths, and you're sitting there every day grappling with that reality. And but I think it's because the market is huge, and I think that no company has the privilege of addressing a market that gigantic as an individual company, and the market just wouldn't enable that, right? But I think the reason why it's worth the stress of that kind of intense competition is, I think we'll probably see the first $1 trillion software as a service company come out of this era. And a pure play, like not building infrastructure and things like that. And I think the reason for it is that these AI agents actually are doing jobs rather than just adding, productivity enhancements on someone else doing the job. And I think that value is so quantifiable and so real that people will pay a lot more for it than you will a productivity enhancement. And I think similarly, I always gave this example, but the legal tech market, I think, was notoriously bad before Harvey. I can't think of one really, really large legal tech company. But it's an important profession. Don't get me wrong. It's just the addressable market of selling productivity software to lawyers. It's just a relatively small number of firms, relatively small number of seats. You just do the math in a spreadsheet. It's just like, yeah, you can make a decent company, but you're not going to make a Google out of that. But then you look at the amount the world spends on legal advice and like doing contracts for your supply chain or doing antitrust review or all these like, long tail of things that are quite valuable. And all of a sudden that market that looked modest looks gigantic. And so the interesting thing about these agents is I think it's changed the total addressable market of software because you're essentially getting into labor markets. And things that used to be backwaters of software, all of a sudden, like really interesting software markets. I think that's really exciting. So I think we're going to see some really important companies come out of this era in the same way we did in the birth of the internet.
Yeah. On the can I keep pulling on this Google analogy that you're using, which is
Sure.
obviously we have a history with Google. John Doerr also did a bunch of the other companies that maybe weren't the preeminent ones and then got Google and Amazon right. But Google in this example was not the first search engine,
It wasn't even like the sixth.
I was going to say,
yeah.
I don't think it was even the top 10.
Yeah.
It was like maybe 15th or 20th search engine. So like, again, let's pull that forward. It's maybe history doesn't repeat, but it rhymes.
Yeah.
Loosely here. I don't know. But like all of these companies that we're talking about, let's take Harvey in legal or Sierra in customer support, Cursor and Windsurf in coding, right? There's like a few categories that we're talking about here. Maybe Glean and search, right? It's like kind of like there's like the mother of all the markets today. They're first. You're first. Do you think about it differently in what it means to be first in these markets today versus somebody waiting in the wings, waiting for the models, maybe a different breakthrough? Yeah, how do you think about that?
Let me go back to the Google analogy for a second and then answer the question, because I think the nuance matters here. I think there's a narrative that is not completely untrue that Google won because PageRank was better. A lot of search engines were reductively based on analyzing the content of the web page, which made it really prone to spam and made it really hard to figure out which of these web pages talking about this topic was actually canonical. PageRank and looking at links and basically sort of anchor links between web pages had essentially a notion of reputation and importance and credibility in addition to analyzing content, and the combination of those two made it work. Like you could search for something and be relatively likely to hit in the top results something that actually was what you were looking for. So it's a really important technical insight. I think some people say, okay, that was Google won because of PageRank. Yeah, well, there's a couple other things. Like Google also signed deals with all of the major portals around the world. Google powered search on Yahoo for a really long time. And you went around almost every country and every market, so essentially Google distributed its search engine and sort of like, basically got distribution through a really effective partnership structure. Had they not, that would have opened the market to a lot of other competitors like Inktomi, who ended up acquired by Yahoo, to go into that market. Secondly, when I got to Google, I don't believe AdWords existed, but there was banner ads at the top. You could like buy a keyword, is my recollection. I might be embellishing history here. And then going to not only cost per click based ads, but the way AdWords ranked it, which was proportional to the click-through rate too, which incentivized high quality ads in addition to optimizing for sort of an auction so people could bid on those keywords, created one of the greatest business models of all time. It was essentially like mapping the demand of, intent on the internet to the supply of people who could fulfill that intent in a very efficient auction. And so then you look at the Inktomis of the world that were licensing their technology to portals, and you realize at that point, the Google's business model was just better. It was just generating cash like it's going out of style, and you just couldn't reproduce that in a B2B context. So you have the partnership strategy, you have the business model, which was really important. If Google's business model had remained selling that yellow enterprise search appliance, it would not be the company it is today. It wouldn't have been able to finance things like Google Maps that I worked on.
Yeah.
You wouldn't have had a business model to support that. All of it's important. Business model, distribution strategy. Google's costs were much lower than a lot of competitors, because we built our own data centers and the cost to serve was like meaningfully lower. All those things mean you can just do different things with your technology or product. Okay, so now let's go to the AI market. How you price matters. Are you charging based on consumption? Are you charging for outcomes? Are you charging just a site license to use the product? That matters a lot. And because, my intuition and the reason why Sierra does outcomes-based pricings is outcomes are valuable. People know the value of an outcome. If you end up charging proportional to technology, you're probably going to end up marginally, you'll have a thin margin on top of the price of AI, which is going down rapidly, like even as we speak. Similarly, what is your cost to serve? I think that There was a lot of companies that, created, 2.5 years ago where they went into places like Kleiner and said, we have all these great AI researchers. We're going to train our own models because we're really smart. Well, it turns out that spending, tens of millions of dollars to train your own model when the foundation model market is sort of commoditizing turns out to be a really unintelligent use of capital, at least in the applied AI market. Most of those companies have been consolidated now at this point. You just can't have the business model of a pharmaceutical company where you spend all of your capital and license it out. And so, and then similarly, like, what is your go-to-market model? Is it product-led growth? Is it a developer motion like Cursor? Is it an enterprise software motion like Sierra? That also impacts your cost to book. It impacts what parts of the market you're able to address. And it also impacts things like attrition when new people come around. The reason why Google was able to overtake Alta Vista was you just visit a new URL. It's really easy. That's always been Google's argument, for when people say they have a monopoly. It's, well, just go to a different search engine. They're not completely wrong on that, right? And in contrast, if you look at, say, a large ERP deployment, it's hard to rip out an ERP system. Every large company in the world has had these like multi-year ERP system replacements. And that's an example of like a market that's like slow to address, but very low attrition when you address it. So I think all these things matter. So I don't think like a first mover advantage on its own is a sustainable advantage. And in fact, if you look at the .com era, it wasn't always, maybe even less likely if you're the first mover. But I don't think it's causal necessarily. I think that what really matters is like, what is your sustainable sort of like technology point of view and advantage? What is your go-to-market model? How do you manage your customer relationships? What is your business model? I think like a pricing model, and I think all of these things matter. The fun part about new technology is, we didn't have cost per click ads in the early days of the internet, and now it's pervasive. Now you can even do conversion-based ads and things like that. I think the exploration going on in the industry on like our approach to outcomes-based pricing is really novel. It's new. I think it's a really good idea. We'll talk in 10 years and I'll tell you whether it was actually a good idea.
I don't think it's going to take that long to know. I think we'll find out soon.
And
outcome-based pricing meaning?
We charge when our agents autonomously resolve the problem, and it's free otherwise. And we do that so that at Sierra, our business model is aligned to your outcomes. It's very new, and it's very much like the difference between impression-based ads and cost per click ads. These are things that excite me right now, is I think we're going to find some key conceptual ideas that are hard for incumbents to copy, maybe give you a different angle than your competitors. And I think just like the narrative I had around Google, which is probably at least half right, on why they succeeded, with the benefit of hindsight, we'll know which of those key insights were actually like the meaningful ingredients to winning in these really big markets.
Next is Winston Weinberg of Harvey on how AI is transforming legal work, automating tasks while elevating lawyers to more strategic advisory roles. An amazing example of this technology eating what we thought were uneatable traditional industries.
You should take AI and basically apply it to X industry. Like, I think that if your company isn't doing that, I don't think you're ambitious enough. If you are doing that, you need to partner with the industry. These industries are incredibly complex. Legal is one of the oldest professions known to man. There are firms that are over 100 years old. There are firms that are hundreds of years old. And having a brand that says we are partnering with the industry to transform it versus we are just going to steamroll the industry is really important for us. And I think that it's led to one kind of a unique brand where it's like very tech forward plus, kind of like caring about tradition, right? And I think we've nailed that, and we have really good brand folks at our company. I think that the other piece of it is just the importance of making that clear to clients and interacting with clients and helping, like letting them kind of help define the brand too.
Can you help me reconcile something? Like Ilya calls it a co-pilot, right? You have this idea of an agent, which is in many ways doing a lot of the work of what somebody would be doing. You see Salesforce that goes out and has their AI cloud or whatever, and then they go,
they're telling customers that they can replace all of their salespeople, and then they go hire a giant sales team to sell their AI cloud. Like, how do you see
Maybe
that?
they're trading off the sales.
How do you see that world unfolding for?
Yeah.
Like, are we just saying that now so we don't scare away customers that we're going to replace people?
I think the reality is there is going to be a lot of task automation. Task automation doesn't mean job automation, right? And so I think that that's something that people miss a lot, right? Like, you are a transactional attorney. Part of your job might be like looking in a data room and finding change of control provisions. Is that going to change in the next couple of years? For sure. These systems are going to be able to do that at a level where you are checking and you're probably not doing necessarily like hands-on all of that work yourself, right? Are you an M&A attorney now? Like, that's it? No. Like, there are so many different pieces, especially to, not like high-level knowledge work, that I don't think these models are just going to be able to automate immediately. And so I think what you're going to see is like increasing levels of task automation, right? Which again, does not mean job automation. Those are different. Do I think that jobs have to change? If 70% of the tasks in the next 3 years of your job are automated, does that job have to change? Yes. But that doesn't mean that it happens overnight. It's not just your entire job is gone. It's the tasks get automated over time, and then your job's going to change. I think that will happen. Like, I do think jobs are going to change.
I mean, I think it's kind of like the early days of Excel, right?
Yeah.
If you work in finance today and you can't use Excel,
yes.
you
it's a huge
can't
problem.
work in finance, but it doesn't mean the job of finance went away. It's
Yeah.
just you have to use this tool as a core part of your toolkit and be really good at it.
And the models are going to, I think that's a good analogy, because it's like there are tons of Harveys for like financial services, right? And they're going to build systems that automate Excel, right? And does that mean that like the job, like everyone that works in private equity is gone? No, right? It's just like some of
venture
those
capital
tasks.
stays. Our work is as subjective as it gets.
Exactly. Yeah. No, but my point here is like, that task is going to change, but they're probably just going to do different things. And I also think like, and this is maybe less about every domain and more about the domain that we work in, but a lot of what you want to do as a lawyer are these things that I think you will be able to do much faster in your career, right? So like 50 years ago, more people were like the CLO. Like most lawyers were like a CLO. Like they were business advisors, right? Like they were not basically like sitting in data rooms.
Chief legal officer.
Yeah, I mean, they were an advisor. Like they were a strategic partner to businesses, right? And now you have to be basically the tippy top of the profession in order to be doing that. Like most of what you're doing is basically giving those advisors all of the insights from all the work you're doing so that they can advise. That's like what you're doing, right? And my point here is the more that you can automate a lot of those tasks, the more earlier on in your career, you can start doing the advisory work. And I think that's going to happen. And from a client, like I'm a client of a lot of law firms now, right? And so my perspective on this has I've been more convinced of this as I've been more and more of a client of law firms for that like very expert advice, I would pay more. Like the reality is like should you buy this company, or should you structure the deal like this, or should you incorporate an XYZ state? Things like that are incredibly valuable, right? And I would pay more for that than I'm currently paying for if I could pay less for the stuff that AI could automate, if that makes sense.
Makes total sense.
It's also kind of an interesting question to ponder whether that's ever going to be automatable or managed by a model, right? Because it's so subjective.
I think that's right. And there's also just like, there's so many pieces. Like a lot of people have the argument of, well, these are the things that no matter what, these models are not going to be able to do because of XYZ. And I don't know where I fall on that. I do think that the models can do a lot if they have all the context. But the reality is like, are we going to carry a model around with us in our pocket that's listening to all of our conversations and we're giving feedback on like what our instinctual responses to people are and all of those things? I don't know, maybe. And I think even with that, there's tons of things that humans do that these models couldn't do. But I also will push on the point that if, like, assuming there's more context for the models, they will increasingly be able to do more things.
Now we hear from Matt Murphy of Marvell. He explains why semiconductors are at the heart of the AI boom and how just a few companies, himself, NVIDIA, AMD, are enabling this massive shift in hardware. why is the semiconductor industry, why is Marvell, why is NVIDIA, why is it so important to this transition right now? Like, why has basically all of the value so far in the last 4 or 5 years, sans like maybe OpenAI, Anthropic, and a few others, basically all accrued at this layer?
Yeah. Well, a couple things. One is it's certainly, take a step all the way back, right? Fundamentally, at least for the last 30, 40 years, right? Semiconductor technology has been one of the key growth drivers, right, of global economic growth. And it's the foundation and basis for almost everything we do. And having been through all these different product cycles, there's different benefits it's brought to consumers and human beings. But in every one of those cycles, there was a huge sort of value attribution, if you will, to a certain set of companies. Like notebooks, like notebook PCs when I started in the chip industry were a luxury item.
Mm-hmm.
Nobody, they were very expensive, they were heavy. That trend happened. Hundreds of millions of notebooks started shipping. Intel benefited big time, but so did the rest of the ecosystem, the memory vendors. I was at an analog company. We were doing all the power management back then for notebooks. It helped us tremendously. And in each of these cycles, the networking wave or optical communications, the cloud computing trend, smartphones, there's always this sort of big boon that comes from that into the chip industry. The interesting thing in those prior cycles is it was very broad-based. Like almost every semiconductor company had their own angle in one of these types of applications. So think of the whole industry gets lifted. Mm-hmm. But the AI opportunity is so unique that it's a lot more value being created because the chip technology has a bigger lever on kind of the end result, which is ultimately productivity. Like I'm talking about like global productivity. And there's fewer companies that possess that unique technology. So this is not a broad-based thing. Mm-hmm. So in the AI wave, it's a big disconnect between the top 3, 4, 5 companies that are really in there and then everybody else who has some exposure to it, but it's not enough to move their needle because they're in other end markets too. Mm-hmm. And so that's coming back to my theme. I've just always believed like market always wins. Like that's what you pick, and then you put the best team together, the best products, et cetera. And so, and then if you think about the value that Gen AI is creating and where that's coming from, it is coming from the fundamental at the most basic layer, the coupling of breakthroughs in high performance computing, right, which NVIDIA has really driven, right, but now other people are also coming in with their own homegrown solutions, right, the large cloud providers, but NVIDIA pioneered all this in terms of the compute layer. But then also coupling it and going back to Mellanox, which they did very well, coupling it with the networking, mm-hmm. The connectivity, the overall system design. And we participate in that too within their ecosystem, but also within all the other cloud providers. That is just this very complex, very kind of tightly knit, closed system that only a few companies have the basic technology to provide it all. And I think the breadth as well. So it's different than the other cycles.
I'm just thinking out loud.
Yeah.
Tell me if you think I'm crazy here.
Okay.
I had John Chambers in this room like a month ago, mm-hmm. who is the CEO of Cisco.
Of course.
And at one time in the world, they were the most valuable company. Okay. And hearing you describe the role that NVIDIA and you all play in this ecosystem really reminds me of the role that Cisco played in the days of the internet. Right? It was all the piping and plumbing.
Right.
And again, for a long time, not forever, but for a long time, the value accrued to them.
That's right.
Now I'm sitting here now like it's, middle of 2025. It's definitely different. You know what I mean? Like, because at some point, Cisco cratered like 90%.
Right.
I don't know. But like, so far, history has rhymed. And maybe this tailwind is stronger, bigger, more permanent? I don't know.
Yeah.
I don't know. Like, how do you forecast that?
Yeah, it's hard to forecast. Numbers are all over the map. But I think there are parallels in terms of, as there been a build out cycle and CapEx and money being spent, and then is there digestion, and then there's economic, there's a lot of factors that happen in the sort of networking boom, right, which I referred to and you kind of brought back with the Cisco story. And now we're in a AI CapEx boom right now. And at some point there'll be a digestion and there'll be some moderation like just you would normally expect. I think a couple things though that's really exciting about this one. One is, and it kind of akin to the innovation that Cisco drove, it really enabled the internet to exist, right? And they drove it. And now you have companies like NVIDIA and others and the cloud companies creating their own solutions to let AI exist. The interesting one is that on the AI side, I mean, there is, and pick your number, you guys have a number in your firm and others, but there's, I don't know, $4 or $5 trillion of productivity out there, right, that AI could really go after in the world. It really could create a massive, for those that win in it, it could create massive, massive economic opportunity.
Next is Yamini Rangan of HubSpot. She talks about cutting through AI hype and focusing on what really matters, creating meaningful value for customers, and the urgency that she feels to disrupt before being disrupted.
One of the things I feel is there's a lot of hot takes and hype and all of these. And every cycle, whether it turns out to be real or not, has like hot takes and every day like some crypto this and Web3 that and now AI this, right? It really comes down to customer value. And you got to go back to, it doesn't matter what all this technology, talk does. You got to go back to who's your customer, what is their job to be done, and can you improve that and add value? That's that's how we look at it. We have like a North Star, which is solve for the customer, SFTC. We talk about this all the time. And then it comes back to forget all the hype and forget all the cool technology. Can we take a neat, feature of AI and make it a necessary feature in AI? If we can prove to ourselves with customer usage and repeat value that we deliver, then there's something in the cycle. If it's not, if it's the cool thing that you do today and then next week it's like churned and everybody is left, then there is no value. So I think you got to like ground yourself in customer value and truth. And if you do that, then you can sift through it. But, at the beginning of the cycle, you just have to use some kind of pattern recognition to say, is this going to work or not, and make a bet. And you cannot be wrong. And, that's what happens. Like I would say that, SAP, I used to work at SAP and, back in those days, there was a lot of question of, is cloud real? Will on-premise ever go away and is cloud real? And would, CIOs ever trust data that's not in their data center and is in some kind of public cloud? And these were real debates there. Now it's not the same thing. I think all of us, who've been established for a while, or if it's a startup, we know and see the value of AI and we're kind of like really focused on what is that value for customers.
If Siebel had deep belief and conviction that SaaS was actually going to be the thing that ultimately upended their business and enabled Salesforce to become a big company,
correct,
they probably would have done that.
Yes.
They just didn't.
That's right.
And then they got cannibalized.
That's right.
And I think that's about to happen all over again to many of these SaaS companies.
Yeah.
And that's the thing, right? Like if you're one of these traditional SaaS companies, traditional as in like you were born in the last 20 years, and you're not leveraging this technology, like you're probably going to die. You're probably going to get completely upended.
I have like two thoughts here. First of all, every one of us running tech companies now, we've got the memo. We read Innovator's Dilemma. Yeah. We looked at Blockbuster. Yeah. We looked at BlackBerry. Yeah. We lived through Siebel. We lived through all of this. We've got the memo, right? And there is no hesitation in kind of looking at what is happening within the tech industry to say, this is big, we're going, right? I mean, I think you're absolutely right. The second thing is that I I think about this like disruption conversation slightly differently, where, if you think about the way to define disruption is that you have a certain market, there is a new, startup that comes into that market and they eat your, TAM and they reset your ability to grow. That is the disruption. I think what is happening right now is that there is a software market, but that market actually now got 10x bigger because it's now software and work market. What you talked about paralegal is work. Typically, software never did that, and it might have provided some help, but it didn't actually translate work. So the overall addressable market went from software to software plus labor,
which is 10 times bigger.
Which is 10 times bigger,
Yep.
which means your job is not sitting there thinking about disruption and is my market going to get smaller? Your job is to kind of define what you are going to do to get a bigger percentage of this 10x market. One of the reasons why customers like HubSpot, is we help them get all their structured data about the company, the contact, the notes, all of that in one place, and it's super easy. Now, we are bringing together all of this unstructured data, the conversations, the emails, the Slacks, the Zoom meetings, the phone calls you have, the transcripts from all of that, because AI can do more with that unstructured data. We've always had access to unstructured data. You can just do more with it. The way we think about it is that we have a natural advantage of bringing the structured data, unstructured data, and even external data from 10Ks, 10Qs, transcripts, communities, like any of that together to give that back to the customer. We don't even need it for training. Like if we say, hey, your salesperson is having this conversation, and if I look at the 10 unstructured conversations, these 2 are best in class. These other 8 have to learn. So I can actually expose what the top 2 reps are doing and make it better for the other reps. That's the value. And the ability to bring data together, to drive real-time insights from a larger volume of data to help customers get value is the advantage, right?
Yeah.
Now, how it plays out, who can get access to that data, how those use cases transform, the work that we are talking about, that remains to be seen. But I do think that there is a advantage in bringing the data together, even if you're not owning that data.
I totally agree with you. The other thing that I wonder how you think about it is like going back to my AI engineer comment. Okay.
Right.
Like if you want to go build the products and services that you think your customers need in this new world, you're going to go have to hire the best of the best.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yes.
Those best of the best, often, they'll look at a company like Harvey, and they'll be like, "Wow, that's the new shiny thing.
Yeah.
That's who you're competing against for that talent."
Yeah.
And so, if talent is the enablement function to get you from where you are to where you want to go, like that often, I imagine that's tricky.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, I think it has always been tricky, right? And the part of it is the risk profile of the person and what they're trying to learn. I think in the case of HubSpot, we act like a startup within a startup. There are so many innovation bets and so many innovation teams that
which you always have, by the way.
Which we have, right?
Like your history is that.
Yeah, we've put these bets, and like now we're actually accelerating the pace of that product and innovation bets that we're putting. And so, a lot of times we'll have conversation of like, okay, you want to do something, why don't you do it here? And here's how we'll enable it. And by the way, we'll give you the resources and there's a higher chance of you being successful. And ultimately, it comes down to the risk profile of that individual. Of course, they can go work for startups and knowing that not every one of these companies are going to become successful, or they can work in an innovation bet within, a company like HubSpot. It really comes down to what the risk profile is. And I think that if you continue to do interesting, problems and you do it in a way that people learn, then you will be able to attract the right talent for your organization. And this is the period that we're all going to look back and say, oh my God, how much did we learn in that period, right? Like there are points in times of my, career where I'm like, oh my God, maximum learning. And that's what, excites me. And that's right now. I tell our teams all the time, I'm like, you're going to look back at these, 3 years where I know we're working super hard and we're going even faster, but you're going to look back and say, that is when I learned the most. And that is when it was like exciting.
Chris Urmson of Aurora joins the conversation on how AI is driving the future of autonomous vehicles and tells us why moving from driver assistance to full autonomy is a far bigger leap than many realize. All of the Waymos that you see on the streets today, we can credit to Chris and his team's work at Google. You believe that it takes a bunch of different pieces of technology to be aware of your surroundings in a way that is safe and good and better than what we have today. What Tesla is saying is we only need LiDAR. Is that right?
They're saying they only need camera.
They only need camera.
Yeah. And
but like they're making a lot of progress.
And technologically awesome. Right?
Yeah.
Like
do you think there's something limited there?
Yeah, I think that they're not going to be able to cross the chasm, right? And there's this fundamental difference between...
Sorry, what is the chasm?
Yeah, that's where it's going to get to, right? There's this fundamental difference between helping a driver where the driver is attentive and paying attention versus replacing the driver in the vehicle. And why do I say that? So let's maybe take Tesla off the table and let's just talk about adaptive cruise control. So this is a thing where you're driving down the freeway, you set the cruise control.
My car has that.
Yeah, it slows down and speeds up based on the vehicle in front of you. So the assumption with adaptive cruise control is that you're looking out the window, you've got your hands and feet ready to go. And so it's actually okay if it doesn't hit the brakes. It should hit the brakes. But it's okay if it doesn't because you're paying attention. And even if it gets it wrong half the time where it needed to hit the brakes really hard and it shouldn't have, you're there as a backstop and you're paying attention, so you're going to take over. And what that allows it to do is to not have false positives. Because if you're driving, I don't know what you drive, but you're driving your nice BMW or Mercedes with adaptive cruise control down the freeway at 60 miles an hour or 65, and it hammers the brakes on in the middle of nowhere. You're like, that's not cool. You do it a second time or a third time, not only are you creating risk for other users on the road, but you're now calling the car dealership and saying, I want my money back. This thing's a lemon. I just drive down the freeway and hits the brakes whenever it wants. And so when you get into the machine learning space, the AI space, you're willing to accept a lack of recall, which means kind of seeing the events, so long as the precision. So the events that you do see are real events, because that's what the customer cares about. And the kind of the product requirements are react when you can, but whatever you do, don't have false positives. Don't hit the brakes when you're not supposed to. And so that you have a freedom on the recall dimension. When you start talking about a self-driving vehicle, one where it's taking over the whole driving task and you're not expecting someone to pay attention, you no longer have that freedom. Because if it crashes into half the vehicles it sees on the road, that's just not a product, right? Whereas in the driver assistance case, if it didn't brake for half the times it should have, it's kind of okay because you're going to take over and hit the brakes.
And are you saying that the jump from driver assistance to autonomous, if not done with autonomy in mind from the ground up, is not possible?
Not possible is a very strong statement, but I don't see how you get there. Again, part of it is market forces, right? That if I'm making a driver assistance system, I want to find this operating point that allows where the false positive rate, the false braking events are so low that I can accept it, and that it behaves well enough that the customer wants it. And then I'm going to take all the cost out of that I possibly can. And so that's going to push you in a direction of down costing because you've kind of met the goal. To go from that to a self-driving system where you have to have both high recall and high precision, you're using a different set of technologies to enable that. So it's kind of how I think about it, at least.
But do you think I'm not the sharpest tool in the shed, but like my understanding was that, we're all moving towards full autonomous.
Yep.
Independent of how you get there.
I think
if you listen to that earnings call that I heard this morning,
Yep.
It was like, oh, that's happening.
And I think that you can believe that without it actually being true.
Yeah. And by the way, you're quite the authority on this. Like, you weren't just like some random business leader and CEO of Waymo. You wrote all of the code.
Well, no, I never.
In the beginning.
I absolutely did not write all the code, right? Like we had an amazing team who did the work.
You were driving the technology strategy from the ground up, writing early lines of code.
Oh, absolutely.
For that system.
Yeah. No, I've had the good fortune to work in this space for 20 some years at this point. And, back in the day working on robots to race in the DARPA Grand Challenge, and then helping found what's now Waymo, and now building Aurora. I had the privilege of working some of this technology, but I definitely did not write most of the code.
Maybe my point was not that you wrote, but as much to say as you are deeply steeped in the technology.
I think so. Yes.
Yeah, like
I like to think so.
You're an engineer turned CEO.
That's right. Yeah.
And in the DARPA challenge, that's how you got to Google in the first place, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, I had been doing, so these DARPA challenges, the idea was back in 2003, the Defense Department wanted to accelerate automated technology for the military. And so they had a competition to have vehicles drive from Los Angeles to Las Vegas across the desert. And so I was at Carnegie Mellon at the time. I was a grad student and became the technical director for Carnegie Mellon's team in that. A lot of good stories there, but long and short of it took about 3 years, and we got to the point where we could mostly drive on our side of the road, mostly not crash into things. And then the Defense Department says, problem solved. We'll leave it to industry to industrialize it. And then in 2009, I got recruited to go to Google to help found a secret project, which is now Waymo, with the hope that we could take the ideas that we'd come up with at the DARPA Challenge and commercialize it and build self-driving cars for folks.
So you're in college, you're a grad student.
Yep. And
DARPA has a challenge at Carnegie Mellon.
No, it was a national challenge.
That you were leading the Carnegie Mellon team.
Yeah. So this was a competition. Again, they put out a call to anyone who wanted to come play. And they said, if you can drive across the desert from Los Angeles to Las Vegas, and you can do that in less than 10 hours, the first team that does that on race day is going to get $1 million check, which at the time sounded like a lot of money. Still a lot of money. And so a bunch of us grad students, a couple of faculty members, we worked on it. The first year we took this Humvee and we cut the top off it, put a big electronics box that had computers. I don't know if you remember Itanium computers, but we had one of the first Itanium computers in it. We had that actually I think of as kind of the Lucy of self-driving cars, the missing link, where it was the first time we had lasers, radar, camera, high performance computing, and mapping, high definition mapping together to get a system to work. That first year, we were supposed to drive about 150 miles that trip. We ended up going about 7.5 miles before literally bursting into flames. Well, almost literally bursting into flames. So it was a little bit disappointing. Honestly, it was kind of crushing, right? You've worked incredibly intensely for 9 months. But the Defense Department, and in retrospect, we recognized that we had basically driven, if you looked at the product of distance and speed, we were an order of magnitude ahead of what anyone had done before, despite not meeting the goal. And so they said, come back next year. We'll give a $2 million check to the winner. And so we came back with Carnegie Mellon. Stanford competed that year. And at Carnegie Mellon, we ended up coming second and third behind the Stanford team.
What year is this?
This was 2005.
Okay.
And so that was exciting. And, it was those first two events were kind of like Robot Nerd Woodstock, right? It was a bunch of folks out in the desert and hanging out, and, it was great camaraderie. And so then the Defense Department said, okay, in 2007, we're going to ask you to bring vehicles. And at this time, we're going to close down. Well, they didn't say this, but what they did is they closed down an airbase and we had to drive around with moving traffic. So they hired a bunch of stunt drivers out of Hollywood, got them in cars, brought them out there. And so we've got robots driving around this old air base. And they had to drive 60 miles around the air base, going various places with interacting with traffic and whatnot. And that one, the Carnegie Mellon team, I was the technical director for, ended up winning that one. The Stanford guys, I think, came second. So, and that nucleus actually that started what's now Waymo, what was called Project Chauffeur when we kicked it off, was a couple of us from the Carnegie Mellon team and a number of folks out of Stanford that kind of built it.
In 2007, what was the car able to do on the base?
Yeah, so it was driving, it speeds up to, 35, 40 miles an hour. It was driving on its side of the road, can make left and right turns at intersections. It could track other vehicles. It could take turns at stop signs. So it was kind of the toy problem sounds dismissive. It's not the way I intend it, but kind of the proof of life that you could actually go do this for real on the real world.
And at that point, once you did that, were you quite convinced that this was going to be a thing?
I don't know that I was all the way there yet. No, I thought this was cool. It was clear how it was going to help the military. It seemed likely this would be useful. But I was still I'd taken a brief stint working for a defense contractor. I was a faculty member, and it seemed like it could be, but it was not clear that it would be.
Yeah.
It took a few years and some of the progress we made at Google to get to the point where no, this is going to happen.
Next up, we have Varun Mohan of Windsurf on how AI is supercharging developers and why this could lead to a surge in innovation as technology becomes faster and more accessible. AI-assisted coding is probably the mother of all AI markets as of today.
The moment ChatGPT landed, it was valuable to consumers instantly, right? This is very not true about autonomous vehicles. I'll give you a little example here. In 2015, TechCrunch ran a story that said, this is going to be the year of AVs. And in 2024, they wrote a story that said, is this the year of AVs, right? I don't think by the end of 2022, which is a month after ChatGPT launched, probably TechCrunch wrote, this is the year of generative AI, and it will be for the next 10 years. It's very different.
Yeah. And Waymo was founded in 2009, right?
It was founded in 2009. The DARPA challenge was 2003.
Yeah.
So it's 21 years of technology.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is fun to see what's happening with you at the bullseye of this incredible time. We have this wave of AI that's like nothing we've ever seen. Then we have this use case, which is what Codium does, which is superpowering developers with code, which is all around structured text, which is perfect for AI. And then you have you and this team and this product that are in the eye of this incredible hurricane. It's like what we dream about. Don't you think?
It is. You can't ask for much more as an investor. I'm very optimistic that AI will, kind of reach every area of our lives in every industry. But when you think about where are the most sort of hair on fire problems and the sort of best use cases, coding is just one of maybe the top 3 use cases after copywriting and then maybe some sorts of customer support. Coding is in the top 3 in terms of it being immediately useful now.
I think that the number of developers is only going to go up. Maybe the way they write software is going to be at a higher level. They're not going to be writing the same kinds of programming languages. They're going to be writing almost something that looks closer to English, that is a little more structured than that. But the way I'd like to look at it is right now Codium sells to the world's largest companies. And if I was to go to any global CIO, a chief information officer, and I ask them, hey, I'm going to give you back efficiency, what do you do? Probably 99% of them will say, I'm going to go and invest more in R&D. Because the way these businesses look at it is, let's say that you currently make $100 in revenue, right? The business can put in $20 into R&D. And the thought process is that $20 in R&D now yields $20 in profit. So next year, they're going to get $120. Now, if that $20 in R&D is going to give them $40 of profit, just because R&D is now more efficient, they should be investing actually a larger fraction of their total revenue into R&D because it's a higher return on investment, right? So I think the point is actually, if the cost of technology goes down, I actually think we're going to get not just a linear increase in the amount of technology, we're going to get a super linear increase in the amount of technology. And I think the number of developers and the people that are going to be contributing technology only goes up. And this is a unique aspect of technology, right? Like the world is never going to be satisfied with the amount of technology that is getting produced. It's very different than food, right? Tomorrow, if Joubin, you ask me, hey, like Varun, I can make food 10 times cheaper. I'm not going to say, hey, I'm going to consume 10 times the amount of calories. I'm just going to explode at that point, right? So I think technology is a very, very unique aspect where I think there's no limit at this point.
And just to continue to pull that thread, if people consume 10 times more technology, then what?
I think abundance in the world. I think consumers are going to be very happy. I think GDP is going to increase substantially faster than it does right now. I think society is going to be better off for it.
Yeah. What do you think?
I agree with Varun. I mean, the way that I kind of like to think about it, maybe this is an oversimplification, but rather than, we're just faster, so therefore there'll just be fewer engineers, I just think that's false. I think we're faster, we'll want to do a lot more. Like I was a product manager for quite a while. I think of all the tasks in the backlog, at Scale AI that I would have totally done if I had had more bandwidth with my engineering team. And theoretically, if they are, twice as fast, even more as fast, I can get way more of those tasks done. And ultimately, I think software is just going to be so much better across the board. There's so many problems with software today. It's not personalized. There's just a lot of low-hanging fruit across tons of different industries. I mean, we can go on and on about all of the crazy large companies that still have, pretty broken software experiences. So I'm just very optimistic on us building more tech, writing more software, and just generally things being higher quality.
Yeah, but if you're let's just say my mom, okay, and you're going to the grocery store, why do you care if Safeway can produce 10 times more applications? Or if you're going to the gym, why do you care that Equinox now has developers that are supercharged in a way that they weren't before? Why will that actually make a difference to your life?
Yeah, I think the way software plays itself in a company like Safeway is maybe multifold. So let's take the first way. The first way is maybe they can more efficiently show people the goods that they want to buy. So shoppers have a better experience inside the store. That doesn't feel incredibly sort of innovative, but maybe that's step one. Step two, and this is me projecting a little bit more forward. When you look at the different kinds of software out there, the biggest kind of software that we have yet to crack that I think is going to be transformational to the world is physical manipulation, right? Think about robotics. At some point, Safeway will probably have some bots in the store that are programmed by software that can automatically sort of put goods or food inside your cart, and you just kind of leave Safeway and a robot just gives you the goods directly from the store, potentially, right? And I think imagine a world in which, and this is kind of crazy, let's say you need to paint a neighborhood. You just write a piece of code that says for house in neighborhood, paint house. And I'm simplifying a ton, but think about how crazy the world could be if you could actually almost do these kinds of operations. And this is what I'm trying to say, right? Things that you basically can't even imagine today are potentially going to be possible, right? It's not going to fit the mold of what we saw in the past. It's kind of like how when the internet came out, people were probably how is this going to affect banking, right? And the reality was most people were writing checks going in person, and now they do everything online, or they now do it on their phone. The modality has completely changed.
That's it for now. If you liked the episode, please leave us a review or go back into the archives where we've done more than 200 episodes with some fantastic folks. This podcast is a Kleiner Perkins production, and I'm Joubin. Thanks for listening.